into the book of Exodus, and we are in our parsha is Shemot, which means names. And of course, perhaps we are aware that in many and most, I think, parshiot, the name of the parsha really comes from the first, somewhere in the first line, usually the first couple of words or something. So in this parsha, it is the same, Ve'ele Shemot. We get this idea. These are the names, but there's so much more than that going on here. So today we're gonna take a journey thinking about where there are names, where there are not names, and we're gonna think about the name that we give to this Torah. We hear it called the five books of Moses all the time, but we don't get Moses until this week. And it's not just in the secular world that calls it the five books of Moses. If you know, on Passover we sing Echad Mi Yodea, that song sometimes, which is who knows one, who knows two, who knows three, four, five is Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the five books of the Chumash, which we know always associates us back to Moses. So in any case, we want to think about those today, but we're going to start with our Torah blessing because that's what we do. So Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu B'Mitzvotav Tzivanu La'asok B'Divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who hallows us with these commandments and commands us really to busy ourselves and engage with the study of Torah. And so that's what we will do today. In order to really think about this question about what are the names and how is it the five books of Moses, if we've already this is our second book and we just had a whole book without Moses, we're going to sort of just go through the Parsha more or less in a linear fashion, and we'll stop in a few places. And I want to invite all of you. I've watched back to see you. A few other Chevra Torah sessions that have happened, both to prepare myself to be in a new Torah study group, but also because I've just watched it before because I like to study Torah. And I, know that sometimes people have different approaches to how they teach it. And I just want to invite everybody to go ahead. And if there's a moment or something that speaks to you that we're giving in the text, I want to invite you to stop me and to bring it up. I will stop in the places where I find interesting, but something that I really like to do sometimes is really just let also you guide where we go here. So with that in mind, let's begin. I noticed that we frequently share the page. Sorry, was there? Go ahead, Suzanne.
Can you tell us what page we're going to be starting on, please?
Yes, so we are on page, if you are in the Plout, which I noticed is traditional, we're going to be on page 382. I apologize, my women's commentary is at my office, so I do not know the page
What's
for
the
that.
number and text?
But we are on Exodus chapter 1, verse 1. So it should be pretty simple to locate. I wish I could take credit.
307 in the women's commentary.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I wish I could take credit for it being easy to find this week, but it's just where the calendar brought us to book 1, chapter 1, verse 1. I see a request to put it on the screen. I can do that also. That doesn't come through on the Facebook.
Did you say 382?
382. Let me know if that's not correct. I know that most copies of the Plout these days are blue. I'm not sure why. I have a red one, and so it is possible that something is different. This is had for a long time. There we go.
Thank you.
On the screen. And I'm wondering, do we have a volunteer who would like to read between verses 1, read from verses 1 through 8? Susie, thank you.
These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, and each coming with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah; Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin; Dan and Naphtali; Gad and Asher. The total number of persons that were of Jacob's issue came to 70, Joseph being already in Egypt. Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the Israelites were fertile and prolific. They multiplied and increased very greatly, so that the land was filled with them. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph.
Thank you. So note, if you're looking in the Plout especially, that is not, we added a verse to where Plout separates sort of the ideas here between paragraphs. And there's a reason that we did that. And I'm curious if the question here is if a large question we're dealing with is that this parsha is called Shemot, which means names. The whole book is called Shemot, actually. It means names, and it starts with names. What's interesting about names in this first 8 verses? What might we notice that gives us a question of what are the names that are actually important here? Eric. I'm sorry, you're muted. You go ahead and unmute.
Okay. I see a pattern. Simeon and was on the same line as Judah. They were and Simeon and Judah was like the original of the priesthood cult was from Levi, and Judah was a powerful tribe in the community. So I think the lineup on the pattern above the Mishkan was a very interesting. I saw a pattern in there.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, there certainly is a significance to the way they're grouped together. Any other notes as we move from the sons into the story of the Exodus that really begins in verse 8 in a way? I'll click down and see. If you are raising your hand, there are enough people on the Zoom. We're fortunate to have a great community to study with that we don't necessarily see everybody raise hands. So if you want to unmute and speak, that's also okay. But if not, I'll tell you what I think. It is.
They're all male names.
They're all male names. Certainly a significant thing here. Thank you, Brad.
They're grouped by mothers.
Yes. And as we move out of naming the sons, of course, Joseph gets his own place, right? Also, if we think about verse 5, where we see Joseph being already in Egypt, certainly there's a practical sense that Joseph was already in Egypt, as it says. So he would not need to be named as one who came down, but we also continue this sense of Joseph being apart and being, something special, something different with a certain responsibility, since he is grouped separately. But what I really start to notice here is that as we move from our story into the story of the Egyptians or our people in Egypt, we name all of the sons and we name Jacob, but we name Israel, but we do not name the new king. When we have verse 8 and we get to a new ruler arising over Egypt, this is, in my mind, and I think in the mind of our ancient rabbis, perhaps the scariest line. We don't think of the Torah as a horror book because it's not, but this is the scariest line maybe in all of our text. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And we don't give him a name. So that's where I want to leave us for a moment. And I'm curious. And I did not bring a particular commentary. Actually, I do have a commentary on that, which we'll jump to in just a moment. But I'm curious, what is the significance of this? We have what does it what are your impressions that we have this naming of all these people? The name of the entire parsha is names, and then we have this pivotal figure in our tradition who becomes a huge problem for us, and he doesn't get a name.
It's alienating.
Will you say more, Rebecca?
It's alienating. It makes me feel like I'm less than something, less than who I am.
Sure. You're not read in to the pertinent personal information of this leader. He's just someone above. Go ahead, Howard. I saw you were about to speak.
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the fact that they don't name this very important figure is a hint that this is a fable. It's not really something that actually happened.
There's sort of that literary device happening here.
It was just a pharaoh.
Thank you. I think that's a really great interpretation, and that is one of the things that we'll talk about probably just organically throughout this discussion. Is how do people receive this book as well? David.
Well, isn't that what Rabbi Leader has said at sermons and Torah studies, that the Torah is not a book of facts, it's a book of truths. And so therefore, if we look and I do it as well, certain parshas or sections of it, I'll think, how did this happen, or why is this? And it's kind of like if you're looking at a superhero movie, a Superman movie, and you're thinking, how did he do this or that? Or this is inconsistent with real life. You're in the world of that. And so you have to accept what's happening is truth. So I think I believe in when I first heard Rabbi Leader say that, it was very surprising to me, having studied Torah for several years, not many, but it was really awakening. And certainly there's other people who believe that it's a book of facts and the things actually happen, and we're all entitled to our own opinions.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate that perspective on this. And you're right. I think, we have to suspend our disbelief to a certain extent. Actually, maybe a larger extent. Yes, Brad, and then Mark.
He doesn't only not have a name, he doesn't have a lineage the way the Hebrews have a lineage. So the emphasis is not on him as a person, but on him as a symbol of power and his role, rather than him as an individual with a family line.
Right. We don't have interest in the other dimensions of the Pharaoh. Perhaps there's a practical that we only need to know what we need to know for his role in our story, but also it paints him with a certain color that perhaps he's an impersonal person. Mark, go ahead.
I'm curious if it's somewhat of a protective bias employed by the author, for instance, where if it's a named figure that's known and trusted in a relationship had with, and they turn their backs on one, it's much more grievous of an injury than if it's this, unnamed, unknown source that inflicts this hardship. So at the end, it can more healthily create this separation between Israel and Egypt, because the wound wasn't done by such a connected entity that might demand retribution, for instance, versus just a separation.
I appreciate that. I think that's actually a very interesting reading, and I will challenge it only because I believe the text will challenge it as we deliberately draw Moses into the personal life of the Pharaoh in some sense. But that's really interesting. Rebecca, I saw your hand for a moment. Did you have something you wanted to add, or? Okay, no worries. So these are really, important points here. There is commentary, of course, on what's going on with this new king. And I'm sure there is somewhere, there was not anything that said, why doesn't this guy directly have a name? But there are questions that say, who is this king, right? And so there are two theories. One, and Chis Cooney really elaborates on these beautifully, this medieval commentary, that in the one sense, this may be a brand new king who truly does not know Joseph. So it's possible that it is a literal explanation, but it is also possible this is a pre-existing king who suddenly had a change of heart, or something came over him. He had a different understanding. And the evidence here is that, I suppose, that there's no evidence because it's still a question, but the evidence that he is murderous is written right in there. So Chis Cooney also points out to us that because it says vayakom, this is the verb that we often use to indicate that someone is arising with intent to kill. So in any case, whether this is a brand new pharaoh or the previous pharaoh has seen something happen or experienced some trauma in his life, this is an ominous moment, and we are meant to understand from the original text that this is right away. We are meant to understand this is a bad thing for the Israelite people, and this is a king who is arising for something negative. But his name is not so important. Brad, does that hand up?
Yeah. Well, real quick, the note in Eitz Chaim says that a new king can also refer to a new dynasty. So it's not necessarily a new individual that they're talking about, but a new dynasty.
Sure. Well, and I think that also, was that your comment that it takes him outside of the lineage?
Yeah.
So I think that also applies there, right? And that in this case, if it was the same dynasty, right, you might say like, a new king was born to Egypt, or, a new king succeeded, but arose. And with that word vayakom implies perhaps that there was some political turmoil, and that it is somebody who came over somebody else for power. So I appreciate that note. If anyone else has interesting notes in their copy of the text, I'm always happy to hear them. Thank you. But let us move. Oh, Howard, go ahead. Were you all good? No, sorry, you popped up on my screen. All good. So in any case, I want to move forward in the text, and I know sometimes we jump around in Torah study, but there's so much just like richness in our narrative this week that I just want to go really through it in a linear way. So we're gonna start with verse 9. And we're gonna read just to cover ground. We're gonna go all the way through verse 15. So is there anyone who would be willing to read this is Exodus chapter 1, verse 9 through 15? Rebecca.
Can you scroll the?
Yes, that's on me.
Thank you. And he said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are much too numerous for us. Let us deal shrewdly with them, so they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies in fighting against us and rise from the ground." So they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built garrison cities for Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they increased and spread out, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians ruthlessly imposed upon the Israelites the various labors that they made them perform. Ruthlessly, they made that life bitter for them with harsh labor at mortar and bricks and with all sorts of tasks in the field.
And one more verse.
The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah.
Okay, so we're going to stop here, and I bet you know why. Because, of course, here we've had a whole lump of exposition for the greater story of the Israelites, which is important. And it's both in Hebrew and when we translate it, it's beautiful literature. And also, when we get to verse 15, boom, we got more names. And so I'm curious what in your mind is significant here. We've just gone, or if there may not be a comment, but we have just experienced a list of names and then a very significant no name, and then two more actual names. Cindy, go ahead.
Well, they were heroes. I mean, they saved so many babies, of the women that are so noted in the story, that they defied Pharaoh's rule. And I think we're not 100% sure if they were Hebrew or they were assigned to the Hebrews, but they really could have had their lives in danger for standing up and making up this story as to why they couldn't later kill the male babies.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. There is a moment in the commentary here for the Plout, which you might all have as well, in 15, which comments on that question: were they Hebrew, or were they actually were they assigned to the Hebrews? And certainly, I think the literal text makes us imagine the latter, that they were probably assigned to the Hebrews. But our commentators really and although it does say in verse 15, right, the Hebrew midwives, but our commentators really are committed, I think, but across time, to them being a part of our tribe, a part of our community. Plout says Hebrew midwives. Their names are of Northwest Semitic type, suggesting that they were Hebrews. Hebrew is a term generally agreed to come from the name of a group called Habiru or Apiru, people who had lost their status in the community to which they had originally belonged. They were not necessarily related except by common fate, and such may in part have been the case in their Egyptian slavery. So actually, we should say, maybe not over time, Plout doesn't seem to care if they are actually part of the Hebrew community. He seems to think there's some sort of a social dynamic at play here, perhaps. So they may not be related by blood, but they may also be in that sort of broader social category of Habiru, which is a really interesting piece in archaeology, which is like really the only connection sort of that suggests that there could be any archaeological or historical basis anywhere here. But Rashi takes a totally different approach, which makes sense because he was one of the originals to do it. So Plout would inherit from him rather than the other way around. But Rashi is really pretty sure that these are Israelite women, and in fact that Shifra is Moses' mother Yocheved, and that Pua is his sister Miriam. And that is, he doesn't really explain a whole lot beyond that. He just says that's who they are. Rebecca, I see your hand.
Thank you for bringing this up, because I've always had difficulty with the semantics of the word Hebrew versus Israelite. Am I referring to Israelites, or am I referring to Hebrews? It almost seems like it's the same thing, but in essence, in what you're saying or suggesting is that there is a difference between the word Hebrew and the word Israelite.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. It depends on the context in which you're speaking and who you're speaking with. But really, if you're looking from a historical archaeological situation, there definitely is a difference. Hebrew does seem to be, I will say, during the first summer of rabbinical school for HUC, during that year in Israel, we take a biblical history seminar and we go on all kinds of fantastic trips around Israel, and we learn all kinds of things. So I want to both state that this is the first class I ever took in rabbinical school, so I could be missing a few things, but there is no archaeological indication that there was ever a group of people called Israelites anywhere in the vicinity of that period of what would have been that period of the Egyptian Empire. However, there is some reference that you can get from hieroglyphics and other places that refer to a group called Habiru or Apiru. And it does seem that there is a significant linguistic connection between Abiru, Hapiru, and what eventually became to be pronounced in English as Hebrews. So it is possible, perhaps, that the Israelites were a group of Habiru. As Plout explains to us, these are a group of people who have lost their status in the community they originally belonged. If we follow the story that the Israelites came down in a famine and then lived sort of on the outskirts, and also perhaps there's some significance to them being shepherds, which we learned from other commentary was not a common native Egyptian practice due to the status of lives, certain goats and sheep in their deity structure. Essentially, Habiru may refer to Israelites, but it also may be a totally separate group. But in any case, the story of the Habiru or the Israelites in Egypt as being enslaved and then the Exodus doesn't really have any archaeological foundation, which I think brings us to Mark. Maybe that you that brought up the idea that this is. Sorry, somebody brought up that the Torah contains truths and not. That was David, maybe, and not. Sorry, yes. Anyway, this is sort of where that comes to. The question is this a historical document in any way, or is this a sort of a folk tale of some kind? And there are certainly those who espouse that this entire book of the Torah was written during the Babylonian exile. As a sort of inspirational story to bring us back. So there's all kinds of questions about the origin there. But that's sort of, which I know I've strayed from your original question, Rebecca, but that is sort of the distinction, at least in my mind, between Israelites and Hebrews. Marina, please save me. I'm just kidding.
I keep thinking, I'm sorry, I keep thinking about the name of the king that's missing there. And I believe that this may be because this story is written from the perspective of the Hebrews or Israelites. Anyway, from the Jews are writing their story and they're naming their own people. And the king who rose is the embodiment of all evil, and we don't want to name him because it's not a particular individual, it's everybody, whoever oppresses us.
Nice. That's a really, I'm trying to think of the right word, but a wise drosh on this element. Yeah. Mara, sorry if I got it wrong. Please let me know how I should refer to you.
No, you got it exactly right. Thank you. I was just, I've got a book called How to Read the Bible by James Kugel. Mm-hmm. And he says that there's a third theory of where Israel came from, that Israelites were neither outside conquerors nor peaceful semi-nomads who gradually infiltrated from the desert. Instead, they were Canaanite revolutionaries dissatisfied with the Egyptian hegemony that operated in Canaan through a network of puppets and vassals. The Apiru and other disgruntled elements eventually overthrew these entrenched powers. So just kind of another comment on Apiru.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I should say there was no archaeological evidence of the Israelites being in Egypt, but there is archaeological evidence of Egypt being in what is now Israel. And so there is another sort of theory, right, that the Israelite people were in some sense, in some capacity, slaves to the Egyptian empire, but they were never slaves in Egypt. They may actually have been slaves in sort of what is now the lower Negev desert. And they have found really ancient shrines relating to sort of jaguar deities and things. If you go down towards, there's an amazing nature archaeological geographical park called Timna in the south of Israel. It is actually one of my favorite places on planet Earth because it looks like Mars, which is cool. And it's gorgeous. And by that site, there are all kinds of sort of pieces of evidence of that ancient Egyptian presence in the land. So yes, I really appreciate all of the thoughts about how this might have occurred. And I think it's important to us to really consider what the authorship, right, is trying to tell us here. So thank you. Shall we? I think we should move forward a little bit because our hour's starting to run short. And of course, we'll take time at the end for our Kaddish list and to say, but let's move forward. We'll finish out this first section. Of course, in our plout, we get these massive page breaks that break us between different sections of the Parsha. So let's finish out the first section and we'll move forward. I will read verses 17 through 22 just for the sake of expediency. But before we move on, I do want to give you the opportunity to comment if there's something that comes up. So, or 16 through 22. I'll start at 15 because it's the middle of a phrase. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, saying, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the birth stool. If it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, fearing God, did not do as the king of Egypt had told them. They let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing, letting the boys live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous. Before the midwife can come to them, they have given birth. And God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and increased greatly. And because the midwives feared God, he established households for them. Then Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every boy that is born you shall throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. So Shiphrah and Puah are named, and they're also rewarded. But it seems there is also a question of what does it mean, and God dealt well with the midwives. There are some that think God dealt well, meaning that God handled their situation properly and allowed for the increase of the Israelite people. And there are some who believe that it refers to the following verse and that it is only referring to what God does for Shiphrah and Puah, which is establishing households for them, which seems to contradict Rashi's point that they could be Yocheved and Miriam because they would not have separate households necessarily, at least at this stage in their journey. So in any case, we're going to move on to Exodus chapter 2 in the Plout. That's page 388. And I'm hoping that somebody who does have the women's commentary open will be able to clarify that page for us as well. This is Exodus chapter 2. We're going to start right at verse 1.
Women's commentary is 310.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I appreciate you being on that. So we're on page 388, 310. Go ahead, Brad.
One comment. It says, the Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, so now it is the work of the Egyptian people as a whole to destroy these young Israelite males. So when we feel later that somehow the Egyptian people have been punished for the deeds of the Pharaoh, there is some complicity here on the part of the people in this situation.
Yeah, that's an excellent observation, really. Yes, there's a very clear deputization happening where Pharaoh perhaps doesn't trust the midwives anymore, and Pharaoh, we like what the midwives do, but Pharaoh is right not to trust them. So he calls on the people to hold all of the Hebrews to account. And so you're right. I guess we don't know for sure how many of the people and if the people accepted this charge, but we do know that it was made and it implicates all of them. Okay, do I have a volunteer to read pages 1 through, Exodus chapter 2, verse 1 through 6?
I'll read again.
All right. Let me scroll on the screen. That's my bad.
A certain member of the house of Levi went and took a wife, a woman of Levi. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him and caulked it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child into it and placed it among the reeds by the banks of the Nile. And his sister stationed herself at a distance to learn what would befall of him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the Nile. While her maidens walked along the Nile, she spied the basket among the reeds and sent her handmaid to fetch it. When she opened it, she saw that it was a child, a boy crying. She took pity on it and said, "This must be a Hebrew child."
All right, thank you. So here we have a crucial moment. Moses, the guy of the book, was just born. Yeah, but we don't name him yet. And we don't name anybody else. We don't name his parents. We don't name his adoptive mother. What do we think? We've named so many people, but we don't name these crucial parents. I also will admit that in chapter 6, verse 20, they do name the parents, but it's a while. It's what we might think of if we're thinking of cinema or, a TV series as a retcon, a retroactive condition, where they added it in order to make it make sense. Go ahead, Rebecca.
As I've mentioned before in other Torah studies, and perhaps this one, through Santa Monica College Emeritus program, I'm taking a class called Bible as Literature. And the teacher explained that Exodus is a literary masterpiece. And that I think perhaps that by not naming the mother or the father in chapter 2, it's a literary device in order to draw intrigue into the story itself.
Nice. Thank you. Go ahead, Donna.
I just want to say God works in mysterious ways. There's more miracles to perform. A lot of things that we see in Torah, it's a love letter to us to know that He's real. And He does allow things to happen a certain way to preserve us and to show the world that He is God. And I know it's difficult, our journeys, what we're experiencing, but 33 hostages are coming home. Keep praying.
Thank you, Donna. Yes. So, yeah, I think there are many different angles which we might receive this type of this text and the choices that are made within it. I think there also is an element here where we have left these individuals unnamed in order to make space for what is to come, which is a pretty important name. So let's move forward now. We'll read let's read between verses 7. We'll just continue on and we'll read 7 through 10. Is there a volunteer?
I'll read if you can scroll it.
I see Suzanne raising your hand. You've been patient. I realize your hand was up
Okay.
I want to give you a chance to read. Thank you.
Did you call on me?
Yes.
Sure. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a Hebrew nurse to suckle the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter answered, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. She named him Moses, explaining, "I drew him out of the water."
Thank you so
Sometime
much.
after
That's great.
that,
We'll stop there for now, but I'll have you when we do the continuation. I'll gladly have you continue.
what does Moses,
So
what does Moses mean in Hebrew?
So Moses is there are sort of two theories or things that people speak about. Some say it does have
Okay.
meaning in Hebrew. Some say it is like purely an Egyptian name. In any case, it means drawn from the water. I'll read the Plout commentary, which I think is interesting. Moshe is here associated with the word mashah, which really I think is meant to be mashah, which represents an assonance rather than correct etymology. The rabbis overcame the linguistic problem. Drawn out should be mashui, while Moshe means who draws out, by suggesting that he was given the name prophetically. So, not that it referred to his being drawn from the water, but that he will draw the people out from Egypt, in that Moses would draw out Israel from Egypt, or that Moses drew himself out, so to speak, because of his merits. The wordplay is repeated by Isaiah. We could certainly double check and confirm that in Isaiah chapter 63, verse 11, but I'm going to trust Gunther Plaut to have told us the right citation. So this is sort of that is the meaning that we apply to it. It is drawn from the water. I am happy to share from my own. My Hebrew name actually is completely from this parsha. I am Gershon Moshe. Gershon is the name which we probably will not get to time-wise, of Moses' son, which means I was a stranger in a strange land. It's Gershom, Gershom, stranger there. And then Moshe is this drawn from the water. So I've always been intimately aware of what these names mean, and it's something that I hope that we all, those of us with Hebrew names, think about what our names mean and how we might take the qualities not only of those who were named for, but of the meanings of those names to bring us forward. And move us through life. So I take great pleasure in being a stranger somewhere, and I like the water. In any case, Susie, will you go ahead and keep reading for us? Sorry, I want to give anyone else a chance. Any other thoughts, questions about Moses' name, certainly as being introduced here? Maybe that is why we didn't name the people beforehand, to make space for this moment so that we really acknowledge Moses. I actually have a question. Is there anything that you noticed? Yeah, go ahead, Panina. I see your hand up. It's good to see you. You are muted, though. There you go.
Okay, so I think there is a reason why there is no names given to the people before, in the beginning of the story. They said the daughter of Pharaoh, no name. They said there is a woman, no name. And the sister, no name. But yet when it came to Moses, they are putting an emphasis on the name, and it's drawn out of the water. Yesterday there was also a Torah study, and I gave my opinion regarding why it happened and why is it that the word is associated with water, was taken out of the water. There was a belief at the time, I suppose maybe by the time that he was named, that if you have two bodies of water, sweet water meeting, a heavenly being is going to show up out of this water and going to be like a godly figure, somebody who is going to have I would say talent or the capability of performing heavenly miraculous deeds. So, and that particular belief was called the Emuna Elis, and it was where, again, I'm saying, where the two bodies of water meet. I don't know about the Niles. I don't know exactly where, at what point the Niles is meeting waters that coming from where exactly. I got to look into it. But the fact that he was taken out of the water gave him heavenly qualities, according to that particular belief at the time. So that's why she also made it a point to call him that he was drawn out of the water. And I think the fact that people listened to him and followed him, it's because of this name, that they believed that he was given those powers.
Amazing.
And it was easy for him to lead them if they believed that he was kind of like a Messiah. It's kind of like somebody who is designated by God to lead them. So this is the way that I look at it, that why the names are not being mentioned all the time before him showing up in the picture, and also the fact that they followed him. I think it's also kind of like putting the emphasis on the fact that he was taken out of the water.
Nice. Thank you, Penina. That's, I just wanted to clarify. You're
I would
referring
like
to
you
sort
to
of
look into this particular thing. It was called the Emuna Elis.
the Enuma Elish. Are you talking about the Babylonian creation like myth
I
stuff?
don't know exactly what.
Yeah.
When I studied that particular portion, it was just presented as the belief that two bodies of water meets, and I don't remember, and just like that now by heart, the century or the date exactly where it started or how it started. As I'm speaking to you, I'm just telling you that it existed. So
Sure.
the fact that it existed sometimes is enough to create a heavenly figure that people will follow because they believe in that particular story or belief or whatever you want to call it. So
Sure.
that's the way I look at it. Otherwise, why
Yeah.
wouldn't they mention the names of these people that are involved? Even Pharaoh's daughter, Bat Paro. She
Right.
must have a name, but it's him. Now it's the point of bringing him up to the stage. And also explaining why people kept him. She could have also told her people to kill him because it's Hebrew.
Right.
But yeah, I think the whole idea is just the story is emphasizing how that here comes a figure that are going to be significant and in magnetism, in the power to draw the people to him.
Right.
And that's how I look at this whole story. Otherwise, names would be mentioned.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really, no, that's an excellent.
And as far as the, one more thing.
We have to move forward. I'm so sorry, but this is a really, you've made a fantastic. I mean, that is the.
No, I just also want to tell you what the word Hebrew means. The word Hebrew means people who are leading donkeys in caravans because they were traders. That's it. That's what the name Hebrew means. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I want to say, Penina, I always learn a lot from you when we do Torah study together. So thank you.
The stage is
really,
yours. Thank you.
Yes. So these are all, this is the point, and what I really want to express here, and we're running out of time. I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to read the Kaddish list and that everyone has the ability to share. But I want to say, this is really, when I posed the question, I mistimed how far we'd get. But when I posed the question originally, which was not only, that we're going to look at these names, but we're also going to consider this question, this is Moses just entered the story in the second book. How are these the 5 books of Moses? Certainly part of it is that the whole story, right, revolves around now this leader who we need to understand as a leader, and there are all kinds of reasons why. But also later in this parsha, when Moses first encounters God, he is immediately like wrapped into the broader narrative of the patriarchs from Genesis, which implies that the whole book of Genesis was all about getting us to Moses in the first place. And there's more on that. And I think that, which I don't think is actually really what Genesis is, but it is this sort of idea that God promises the whole time that the people will be in the land and that there will be 400 years of slavery and that they will come out. And so, in that sense, we require Moses to lead us to freedom. And perhaps that is the reason the whole time. Also, I just want to note that Moses spends a long portion of his life without a name. Not a long portion in the grand scheme, but it's been at least 3 months, right, before Pharaoh's daughter finds him and then sends him away to be suckled. And then he comes back, and then he's finally named Moses. So just a thought, maybe in a humorous sense, what were they calling this baby for like 6 months? Well, just like a little guy, basket boy. I don't know. In any case, I really appreciate the study and thinking about these names with me. And I do want to move us now out of our Torah portion and into our portion of memorial. Of course, we have the blessing of being a longstanding community. So we have many names on our Kaddish list, but I also wanted to open it up to all of you to put in the chat. I know we have people who join us on Facebook, so to put into the comment section or to name aloud who we're remembering this week. Howard, I just saw your hand go up. Please.
Well, yeah, I came in a few minutes late, and I don't know if you were introduced, but I wonder who you are.
Oh, of course. I apologize. I did introduce myself, but it was right away at the beginning. Thank you I have been Jeff, your rabbinic intern at mostly at the Glazer campus for Wilshire Boulevard Temple. I am a 5th year rabbinical student. I am months away from ordination and being a real life rabbi. And I have a great love of text and Torah, which I think is not unique among rabbis, but is something that is a real privilege for me to get to share with all of you. So I appreciate being welcomed into this group today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So with that, I will read our Kaddish list. I also have it on the screen so that you can read, and also because there are many names and I want to be respectful. And so if I do mispronounce something and you're aware, I welcome, a brief correction. So in the past month, our community is lost, and we are remembering Nancy Bell, Alice Berkowitz, Jerry Browerman, Hamlin Emery, Herb Glazer, Mark Michel, Myrtle Pinsky, Sander Romick, Robert Bob Roth, Richard Sires, and Ralph Julius Stern. We also remember any of those who have died defending the United States of America and those who have died serving the state of Israel. In the past week, here are the yahrzeits, our anniversaries of passings. We have Irving K. Abramsky, Bertha Adishek, Zelda Altman, Fanny Ball, Teresa Beranek, Charles Benjamin, Philip Bennett, Iraj Berliani, Norman Berkowitz, Steve Berman, Victor Berman, Donald Bernstein, John Breuer, Chester Brown, Joseph Caden, Morris Clayman, Carol Cohen, Arthur Daum, Jerome Disner, Joseph Dresser, Elaine Edelstein, Fred Ehrlich, Estelle Ellison, Sid Engelman, Saul Feinstein, Eve Yavil Fine, Barnetta Finkel, Esther Fischler, Robert Joseph Flicker, Fanny Freiselman, Robert Fried, Regina Friedman, Robert Friedman, Robert Garber, Robert Garber, Mindy Garvey, Aubrey Glazer, Hilda Gluck, Daniel Goldman, Gail Gordon, Roberto Grimberg, Edward Gurney, Richard Bernard Halligan, Margaret Hartnett, Henry Henningsen, Cecil Barnett Hilfman, Jack Hirsch, Harold Hoffenberg, Myra Horn, Robert John Ermis, Jerry Jacobson, Arnold Lorber, John Marion, Michiko Nickerson, Armand Ophel, Hetty Orden, Mata Einhorn Pearl, Rona Bierman Pullman, Lillian Rappaport, Ruth Raup, Harry Rex, Patricia Oppenheim Levine Rice, Samuel Roddy, Irving Rodner, Regina Ross, Margaret Rothstein, Judy Rudman, Sharon Schechter, Sally Schlossberg, Arthur Schwimmer, Henry Seidman, Sarah Jarris, Alan Jonas, Paravish Kamkar, Orna Kaplan, Amiram Carney, Jeanette Paul Keene, Jerry Kleinman, Marion Kopolov, Carol Beth Korn, Sarah Kraut, Louis Leon, Myrna Lepo, Stephen Leventhal, Lillian Shamist, Ella Sherman, Jeanette Snyder, Leroy Solomon, Regina Solomon, Raymond Stanley Spiro, Gerald Stark, Jerome Steyer, Erwin Stein, Gilbert Strauss, Hayward Tamkin, Barbara Taub, Audrey Traeger, Stephen Tolkien, Marion Verton, Julio Wall, Fern Weber, Adele Weinstein, Nathan Weissman, Jack Wexler, Rosalie Witz, Burton Woolner, Dina Yarmus, Ernest Zielberger. And looking to see in our chat if there are any names that have been added. I don't see any there. Are there any names that anyone wants to share out loud before we join together to say Kaddish?
Just, Rabbi, all the people who lost their lives in the fires, I don't know all their names. So sad.
Yes. And of course, we acknowledge those who no longer have anyone to preserve their memories. I'm putting the words of the Kaddish on our screen, and we'll rise together if we're able and if comfortable, and we will pray. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi, be'alma divra chirtei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayachon uv'yomechon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala uv'zman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi shma v'shnei rabam v'yitle'olam almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei v'kudusha baruch hu. Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran ve'alma imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimroham, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen. All right. I want to thank you all again so much for joining us this morning, for studying together, for sharing your wisdoms with me, and for taking the time to follow that commandment, which is one of my favorites, to busy ourselves with the study of Torah. So I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Everybody have a good week.
Shalom.
You're a
Have a good
scholar,
week.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, to be, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rebecca,
you.
for your insight. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Merle. I love you all. Bye. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
Bye.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I'm curious, do you ever have time for just a quick thoughts after the 10 o'clock hour arrives?
Yeah, I've got a moment.
So I flipped ahead to the Israel 63:11 and was reading that, if you mentioned, and it's kind of a segue into the, verse 12. It says, who led them by the right hand of Moses with his glorious arm, dividing the water before them. And when I read those words, you think about like this, the supernatural